Shalom, brothers and sisters. All honor and glory and praises goes to the Most High Yahuah. I'm Brother Jedaniah, and I have something interesting to talk to y'all about. You know, I just finished making a video concerning us still following the stranger, still coming underneath them, still subscribing to them and listening to them preach and teach to us, and how we still suffering from that slave master syndrome when we hear one Caucasian come up and say, hey, I'm with you, I believe you, you are the real Hebrew Israelites. And we go around just acting a fool because we heard that, and falling all over chairs and stuff, and jumping up all behind them and following them without even testing the spirit, without even checking with the Most High, without even checking them out for a while and see if that spirit, that other spirit that they have, gonna manifest in them. And I could think of a few Caucasians who got their video channels up, and there's a host of Hebrews underneath them, and they're flocked underneath them, and they are listening to them, and they are following them. One I could think of is a prepper, call himself Prepper, and there's a whole lot of people who's flocked Hebrews just because he say the real Hebrews are these black people here in America. And I could have swore there was a bunch of black seals clapping right there, just eating everything up and not understanding that the Most High didn't appoint any of them to lead us into the kingdom, or lead us into His holy word, or to follow them at all. Here's what I see from this particular Caucasian. He is calling for Zion, and not only Zion, but everyone else is subscribed to his channel, to prep. And when you prep, you prepare food, water, clothing, guns, ammo. You prep a bug out bag. You prep a location and everything. You are doing all this according to your own self-righteousness, your own saving you, saving yourself, saving your family, instead of the Most High being your Savior. He is the one who said He's going to come. He's going to provide. He's going to bring you to wherever He wants to needs to bring you. See, y'all don't see these things. I see, and I got my eyes open. I'm not just letting anybody in, and that's including my own people. I'm testing the spirit with them as well, and I'm watching them, and before I let them in, really in, to my circle. You know what I mean? Very, very, very cautious with anybody. It doesn't matter if they're Caucasian or black or whoever they are. I'm always very cautious, because men will lead you astray. I don't care who they are. But the Most High is not appointing them over us. You understand? We're supposed to be ye separate from them and coming together and congregating. And if they want to come into us, they have to learn our ways, and they have to come in under us. It's not the other way around. And I'm seeing this prepper leading them into damnation. You see, the Messiah told those 12 disciples of His to go out without no script. Don't bring don't bring your purse. Don't bring no money. Don't bring no food, no water, no clothing. Don't bring nothing. You go out there and let the Most High provide In the same sense, look what happened when we left Egypt. We left in such a haste. We left, we was out there in the wilderness, and the Most High had to provide food and water, and it kept our clothes from going old on our body. He kept us. He took care of us. And you see, what's happening here is you're losing faith in the Most High without even knowing it, subconsciously. And you're putting more faith in this man, and you're being preppers now. You're coming by underneath him. And it's very subtle. You wouldn't think there's nothing wrong with it. But unless you really really study the scriptures, and you get a real understanding of the Father, you get a real understanding of his holy plan, his salvation for you, Zion, you would be deceived. And I see a whole lot of people being deceived, not only by our own people, because we got some of our camps telling you to run off somewhere. Instead of trusting and having faith in the Most High, I'm seeing it all over the place. Brothers and sisters, you got to get rid of, and you know what? I'm guilty of it as well. But I stopped learning anything from any one of them according to the script. Now, I'm not talking about stop learning other things. Let's say they're reporting news, or they're telling some truth about what their people is doing, and I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about being led by them according to scripture. There's another one that's out there that's preaching and teaching. A couple of the Caucasians I know that's teaching and preaching a word, looking like us, sounding like us, everything. I mean, just there's nothing wrong with that particular portion, preaching and teaching the word, but we are not to be taught by them. You don't need to go subscribe to them, come underneath them, and be taught by them just because they say, I know who you are, and you're clapping like seals and jumping up and down and falling underneath them and making excuses for all the other stuff that they're bringing in that don't have nothing to do with our salvation and the way the Father is going to bring us out. So this is a warning video right here to all of you Gentiles as well, but mostly to Zion, my brothers and sisters scattered around the earth. Be careful what you are doing with the other nations. Put everything into our nation first. Find whom you need to be with to get through this of our people, and stick to that. Now, I'm gonna attach a video from this brother here, Victory Manifest, and I highly recommend that you go subscribe to this brother channel and check out his videos. Very gifted and talented brother, just like Yahuah. Go through his videos starting from the very beginning, because he's very talented. Now, if anything that you may deem that he may say that's wrong, just hold off on that. Bring before the Most High. Pray about it. He may give you the understanding later on. The same thing with me. You must pray about certain things. This brother is very good. And there's another brother. Let me move this. I want y'all to go check out One Deep Israelite. This brother here, he's a good teacher as well. He's on the rise just like me. As we get knowledge and wisdom and understanding, and he's standing up for his people. So go check him out as well. And in Zion, it's about time that we look out for one another. Now, I want to state this again. There's nothing wrong with learning other things from them. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just talking about the Bible itself, Scripture. Do not follow any Gentile according to the Scriptures. And this video is going to be very eye-opening to you, Zion. And you're going to get an understanding through that video more than the one I made. And I may still post that other video sometime in the future. I might redo it. But this brother breaks it down. And, you know, I've always posted other people's videos to my channel. You know, I'm subscribed to a whole lot of people here. And some of them are Gentiles. But I don't learn Scripture from them. I learn other things from them that may be pertaining to script, Bible prophecy, certain truths that come out. I mean, I got a whole host of people like this one here I'm learning some health issues from, and Dr. Mumby from Africa. Disciples of the Way. Just some of them I got to unsubscribe from, but it's a whole lot of them. But what I'm saying is, if they're preaching and teaching script, then you need to be careful and get away from them, brothers and sisters. For real. This brother's going to explain it, so stay tuned. I'm about to play this video. Subscribe to them two brothers that I said, and go learn from them. We got all of us have different pieces of this puzzle. You know, I'm on one level, they're on another, and when you put all that information together, a greater picture emerges. That's how I learned. That's how I progressed. That's how where I'm at right now. But I'm even moving into another area because of what the Most High put in my heart about being underneath the Gentile. And it was due to a comment by a sister who put a comment on my channel where she was talking about Dana Stevens and the prepper dude, seven trumpets. I remember I was subscribed to him, but there was something egging me in my spirit about the prepper guy, and I couldn't place it yet. So as I'm watching his videos, then it came to me what it was. But now it really, the understanding really set in after when I saw her put that up. It was something that came to my spirit like, oh man, our people are underneath. Wait a minute. And it just kind of came to me. They're underneath these people, listening to them. And then I thought about it, and I said, wait a minute. And I thought about Prepper Dude, what he was teaching. And then the Most High brought into remembrance how Messiah told the disciples to go out with nothing. But this guy is doing the opposite. You see how subtle the serpent is? And I'm not saying this guy doesn't mean well, but what I'm saying is he's not your leader, and you shouldn't be behind him. And you wouldn't even notice that if the Spirit of the Most High didn't give you that understanding. Or maybe he just gave me the understanding so I can share it with you. But because that's how he works too. But anyway, and Dana Stevens, even though he is doing an excellent job of saying who we are, giving us more insight on his people thinking and all that, but drawing Hebrews to himself to be underneath him is something that he shouldn't be doing. And it's something that we should know, but we don't know. And teaching the word to our people, that's something, I mean, mentioning the scriptures that he know to help wake us up and get across to what he's talking about, that's different. But when you are standing up as a leader over someone, and it's just like going back to the slavery days. You're underneath the master again. And this is something that our people, you should understand what I'm talking about. And if you study the scriptures, then you'll know for sure what I'm talking about. How the Most High never put any other nation over us, especially to teach us his word, his commandments, or anything. He never appointed any of them to do that. We ought to come away from that. And then you're going to start hearing more things, and because you're underneath them, saying, hey, they're of the Most High, they're anointed, they're on point. You're going to put them in authority, as an authority figure in your mind, and you're going to be underneath them. And then next thing you know, you're going to fall for everything that they're saying, including start prepping and getting prepared and doing all these other things the Most High didn't command you to do in these end times. He's going to lead and guide us himself. So watch this video, very insightful, and go back on these brothers' videos as well as my own. Go back on my videos and get understanding and watch my progression and see where I'm at. And with that, I'm going to say shalom, brothers, sisters. Take notes with these videos and open your ears and hear.
All praise to the Most High Yah. This is your brother L. We're going to start at Exodus chapter 30, verses 30 through 33. Right now, a lot of our people have complaints about the Gentiles. One of the main complaints that I hear from our people is that the Gentiles and the strangers is culture vultures. They use cultural appropriation. They take all the things that our people practiced. They take all the gifts and talents that our people have, and then they use it for themselves, but put a whitewash spin on it. That's a main thing that's been happening amongst our people. Ever since we found ourselves in these different countries, in these different nations, there indeed has been cultural appropriation that takes place. Now, what we need to realize is that if we followed the laws and commands of Torah and had the mentality that the Most High wanted to put in us, then we would guard our sacred things from the culture vultures and those who practice cultural appropriation. We would already be guarded from that if we walked after the ways of the Most High. And what I want to do is go through some scriptures of how the Most High commanded us not to let the strangers and the Gentiles partake of certain sacred things. Now, we already know the Father and the Messiah has not excluded them from salvation, yet there are some sacred things that we are commanded not even to allow the strangers among us to partake of. And there is a reason the Father gave that command. And we see the fruit of what's happened from our disobedience on not keeping those commands that the Father gave us of certain sacred things to keep the strangers and the Gentiles away from. For when we disobeyed him and let them in to the sanctuary, into the Holy of Holies, and to partake of the sacred thing, they do what they always do. They appropriated it. They became vultures and went in and defiled our sacred things or stole our sacred things. And why did that happen? Again, because we disobeyed the Father and allowed them to do it. So I want to help speak the truth to get our minds back in proper order and to make us wise so that we do not allow the stranger and the Gentile to partake of the sacred thing. We need to get back into the mentality of guarding our sacredness. Since we have not guarded our sacredness, the culture vultures have come in. The cultural appropriators have come in and they've stolen that which was not created by them or manifested by them. They've trespassed. They've been thieves and they've taken what the Most High endowed upon us to give unto the nations. So I want to go through these scriptures so that we will never allow ourselves to be culturally appropriated again when we get back into the mentality of keeping the Most High's laws and commands and of being defenders of our sacred things, being defenders of our sacred heritage, our sacred culture, being defenders of what the Most High entrusted to us. Let's go to Exodus chapter 30, verse 30 through 33. Listen to what it says here. We're talking about guarding our sacredness and not allowing the strangers and the Gentiles to appropriate what the Most High never meant for them to have. We're not excluding them from salvation. We're just saying, even with them being amongst us and being inheritors of salvation, there's still certain things that they must not be privy to. And there's still certain things that are forbidden to them. And we must be wise to guard our sacred things so that they will not come in and do what they've always done of stealing, killing, destroying, and defiling our sacred things, our sacred culture, our sacred ways and practices, our sacred holy books. Listen, our sacred clothing, even the whole 9 yards. All that has been appropriated because we allowed them in to the sacred sanctuary. Here's what it says in Exodus chapter 30, verse 30 through 33. It says, "And thou shalt anoint Aaron and his sons and consecrate them, that they may minister unto me in the priest's office. And thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel, saying, This shall be a holy anointing oil unto me throughout your generations. Upon man's flesh shall it not be poured, neither shall ye make any other like it. After the composition of it, it is holy, and it shall be holy unto you." Listen to this. "Whosoever compoundeth any like it, or whosoever putteth any of it upon a stranger, shall even be cut off from his people." So anybody that copied or appropriated this holy sacred oil or put it upon a Gentile or a stranger was immediately cut off from Israel. Immediately anathema, maranatha, as Paul would say, cut off, receive the judgment. They're done. Just for allowing a Gentile or a stranger to culturally appropriate or be a culture vulture of this special sacred oil that was only meant for our people, more specifically for the Levite. If any of that was put upon a stranger, for this was the oil that they used to anoint the kings of Israel, the men who were raised up to lead our people. This was the holy oil that confirmed and validated that they were ordained to be a king or an elder or a priest or one to be looked to as a high governor amongst our people. This oil could not be poured upon a Gentile. It could not be poured upon a stranger. And since our people disobeyed, what took place? We allowed these culture vultures, these strangers, and these Gentiles to get hold of this special oil. Now what do? Selling it as perfume. When you look up the ingredients of this special oil, you will find out that a lot of the high class $1,200, $1,500 bottles of cologne and perfume that they sell have these same ingredients in it. So oil that was meant to anoint the kings of Israel, that the Most High commanded us, do not let no Gentile or stranger even touch this. Do not even put it on them. That same oil that was used to anoint kings and prophets and governors and elders and captains is now being used, being sold as perfume and cologne to whorish Gentiles and whorish people amongst the nations. Totally misusing what the Father meant to be sacred. That's an example of cultural appropriation. Now when you walk through the mall, you can't even walk through the mall without folk trying to give you samples of all this cologne and perfume that actually came from your forefathers, and them Gentiles and strangers was never meant to have it. For it says again in this command, Exodus 30:33, "Whosoever compoundeth any like it, or whosoever putteth any of it upon a stranger, shall even be cut off from his people." That is the sacred oil. So that gives us another revelation and insight about what the Messiah meant in his parable, where he said the wise virgins were the ones who had their oil. Those wise virgins represent those of our people who do not give the sacred thing or the precious thing unto the Gentiles and the strangers. You got to know how to have boundaries with these folks. For we've seen all throughout history that when you share too much with them, when you bring them in too close, I'm talking about the strangers and the Gentiles, a spirit will always rise up in them to steal, kill, destroy, and defile. So even amongst our people, we have to be wise. Especially amongst the strangers and the Gentiles, we have to be wise. So you see in this example of this set apart holy oil that it could not be poured upon a Gentile or a stranger. That was strictly for Israel, strictly for our people. And still to this day, there are many things that are supposed to strictly be for our people. Certain types of music that's only supposed to be for our people. Certain types of set apart garments that's only supposed to be for our people. Certain types of things that we do is only supposed to be for our people. Stop letting these appropriators and culture vultures in. Guard your sacredness. My people, guard your sacredness. Just like we are commanded to guard this sacred oil. That's how we must guard our sacredness, guard our culture, and guard our heritage. Because if we don't, you'll have folk out here talking about they Jews, and they are not, but they are the synagogue of Satan. They stole our book and then created something called that wicked Babylonian Talmud. They stole our book and created stuff like that wicked religion of Christianity. They stole our book and now have created things like that wicked religion of Islam. That is a spirit of cultural appropriation, culture vultures. And it happened because we did not guard our sacredness. We have not guarded our oil. But the Gentiles guard their oil. In the book of Revelation, it says, even when all the destruction is hidden, the Gentiles is going to put a law that says, do not touch the oil or the wine. So they will not allow folks to touch their oil or their wine. But us, on the other hand, we've been so simple in disobeying the Most High that we let them come in and take our sacred oil and take our sacred wine that's supposed to only be used for our drink offerings to our Elohim. Now they're using it for drunk orgies. Like the wickedness that they're supposed to be doing in Las Vegas of trying to have an orgy to pass the record of the one done in Japan. That's what happens when you let these folks get your sacred oil and your sacred wine. They use it for orgies. They use it for pleasure. They use it for all hell, death, flesh, and the devil. That's what happens when you don't guard your sacredness. That's what happens when you let these Gentiles and strangers lead you. They will lead you into error. That's again leads me to another point. Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 14 through 15. The Father commanded us never to let a Gentile or a stranger rule over you as your king. Listen to this. Deuteronomy 17, it says, when thou art come unto the land which the Most High thy Elohim giveth thee, and shall possess it, and shall dwell therein, and shalt say, I will set a king over me, like as all the nations that are about me. Listen to this. Thou shalt in any wise set him king over thee, whom the Most High thy Elohim shall choose. One from among thy brethren shalt thou set king over thee. Listen, thou mayest not set a stranger over thee, which is not thy brother. So the Most High commanded us never let no Gentile or no stranger be your leader. Now we know at this time we are in a foreign land, a strange land being ruled over by strange people. Yet we can't control who they put as the president and who they put as these so-called leaders and congressmen in this country. Even if all our people went out and voted, we're only so much of the population. So no matter if all our people voted for one particular righteous candidate, the Gentiles outnumber us. We just in their land right now, and it's their time right now. But it shall be our time as well. But we can still keep this law and commandment in our assemblies. Those of you Hebrew brothers and sisters, you should, how could I put this? I can't tell somebody what they should or should not do. All I'm going to say is the Father is commanding us, don't be in no assembly where there's a Gentile or a stranger leading and lording over you. I had a friend of mine that was going to this congregation and had a Gentile leadership. And right on cue, it tanked. A situation happened with him and his wife. They got divorced. Then they kicked him out of the eldership. And they was running around stalking him and camped out in front of his house, seeing what he doing, trying to find fault with him. Needless to say, now he's moving over to Texas because of what happened of him sitting under that Gentile rulership and leadership. Brothers and sisters, there should not be no Gentile or stranger over us in the assemblies. Israel must lead Israel. We followed them for too long. We cannot keep letting these appropriators and culture vultures come in and steal the minds of our people. I'm not saying that Gentiles can't be amongst the assembly and amongst the people. I'm not saying that they can't partake and even go out and minister. But they must not be the head of the assembly. They must not be the head of the leadership. For the Father has commanded that if you put them at the head of the leadership, they will lead our people just like Jim Jones led our people to their very death. That's what will happen when you follow a Gentile or a stranger as your religious leader, as your spiritual leader. They're going to lead you to death. The blind can't lead the blind. They've had 4,000 years to get it right, and they still ain't got it right. So a Gentile or a stranger don't need to be telling us nothing about the Most High Yahuah. Israel must lead Israel. We must follow the Messiah first. For as it says in the book of Hebrews that the Messiah sprang from Judah. It's a Hebrew man leading this kingdom. So some folk may say, man, I don't agree with that. Well, I bet you're going to follow the Messiah, and he's a Hebrew male. The Most High ain't putting no Gentile or no stranger over his eternal kingdom. So if that don't set right with you, then the Messiah being a leader and him being a Hebrew must not set right with you. Because that's just the order of his kingdom. And I'm going to be one that guards the sacredness of this truth. And I'm not going to allow nobody to come in and culturally appropriate me and mine. I'm not going to allow no vultures in. I'm going to swat away them vultures like Abraham did whenever they was trying to swoop down and eat up the offering when he made the covenant with the Most High. So we have to remember, brothers and sisters, to guard our sacredness. Just like it says in Exodus 29:33, and they shall eat those things wherewith the atonement was made to consecrate and to sanctify them. But listen, but a stranger shall not eat thereof because they are holy. So there was certain food that only our people could partake of, certain set apart holy food that even the strangers could not partake of. Remember, these laws are set in place so that our people would remember to guard our sacredness. Also in Leviticus 22:10, there shall no stranger eat of the holy thing. A sojourner of the priest or a hired servant shall not eat of the holy thing. So even the servants that was in the house of our people and the priests could not eat of the sacred thing, the set apart thing, the holy thing. So from our oil to who our leaders are, to the food that we ate, there's certain things that the Gentiles and the strangers was forbidden to partake of. And that's the same mentality we need to have. Stop letting these culture vultures in to the sacred thing. Don't share everything with them. Don't bring them in on all your plans or what you got going on. Be wise, my people. Guard your sacredness. Hallelujah. We have to, especially in these times, for we live in these times like in the days of the Messiah. It said where they sent out people to listen to him who feigned and acted as if they were righteous men, but they were sent amongst our people to find occasion to put him to death. And don't think that they aren't sending out these same folks, strangers who look like us, Gentiles who look like us, to be amongst us, to then run back to Caesar and report us and get us delivered up. That's why the Messiah said, beware of men. They shall deliver you up, scourge you in synagogues, deliver you up to get killed. And the whole time we'll be thinking that they doing the Most High's work. And why did that happen? Because we let them in to our sacred things. We did not guard our sacredness. There was a time where we were really keeping the law that a stranger would be put to death for not minding their business or trying to be amongst the forbidden things that wasn't allowed to them. Numbers chapter 1, verse 51. It says, and when the tabernacle setteth forward, the Levite shall take it down. And when the tabernacle is to be pitched, the Levite shall set it up. Listen to the judgment it said on the stranger. It says, and the stranger that cometh nigh shall be put to death. So our people wasn't having none of that culture vultures and cultural appropriation. If a stranger or a Gentile even got close to something that was forbidden for them to even touch, they got put to death. And that's the seriousness that we need to have today, brothers and sisters, to separate ourselves from those who would wish to appropriate our sacred things. Because that's what Nehemiah commanded the people to do. Nehemiah was of Judah, and he had this mentality that I'm trying to put in us. to guard the sacred things. Let's go to the book of Nehemiah, chapter 9, verse 2 through 3. Listen to the mentality that Nehemiah had, because this is how we need to be in this day and age. It says, and the seed of Israel separated themselves from all strangers. Let me read this again. And the seed of Israel separated themselves from all strangers. So these brothers and sisters had a mind to guard the sacred things. And in order to do that, they said, okay, we got to congregate amongst ourselves first. We're not excluding the Gentiles from salvation, but they don't need to be in on this because they nosy and they always take what we say and run and report it to our enemies. So we're going to keep them out of this. The seed of Israel separated themselves from all strangers and stood and confessed their sins and the iniquities of their fathers. And they stood up in their place and read in the book of the law of the Most High their Elohim 1/4 part of the day, and another 4th part they confessed and worshiped the Most High their Elohim. So Nehemiah wasn't like these civil rights leaders. Nehemiah wasn't like the NAACP and all them folks who got fake Jews in their leadership, got white boys in the leadership, mulattoes and half-breeds with Gentile daddies in the leadership, leading them when the Most High commanded for that not to happen. Nehemiah did not have that mentality. And you notice that all these organizations and groups that have that mentality, they always end up being ineffective to lead our people. And the reason they are ineffective and have done nothing for our people since our time in America is because they too compromised. They've let the culture vultures and the cultural appropriators come in and steal the oil and the wine. They've let the cultural vultures come in and set themselves up on the throne as our kings and our leaders. That's why the blind are still leading the blind. We're not going to go nowhere until we get this Nehemiah mentality. Separate from the strangers and the Gentiles. I'm not saying exclude them from the assembly or exclude them from salvation, but there's certain meetings that they don't need to be privy to. There's certain plans that they don't need to be privy to. There's certain activities and strategies they don't need to be privy to. We must learn how to close ranks and guard our sacredness. You see? We got to have that same zeal Nehemiah did. Keep these cultural vultures outside. Keep them, like my grandmother would say, at a spoon handle length. Keep them at a length and at a distance. Don't tell them all your business. Don't show them all what you got going on. Listen to how Nehemiah handled it. Nehemiah 13:22 through 30. It says, in those days also I saw so-called Jews that had married wives of Ashdod, of Ammon, and of Moab. And their children spake half in the speech of Ashdod, and could not speak in the Jews' language, but according to the language of each people. And listen to what Nehemiah did whenever these folks was not guarding their sacredness, whenever they was allowing the culture vultures to come in and marrying these forbidden women. Listen to what Nehemiah did. And I contended with them and cursed them and smote certain of them and plucked off their hair, and made them swear by Yahuah, saying, ye shall not give your daughters unto their sons, nor take their daughters unto your sons or for yourselves. So Nehemiah slapped them, punched them, yanked their hair out. He gave them a harsh rebuke because he had a mind to guard the sacredness, to guard the sacred oil, to guard the leadership, so that only our people would be in leadership. We got to have that same heart and zeal that Nehemiah did to guard our sacredness. Stop letting these culture vultures and cultural appropriators in amongst what is sacred to only us. Listen to what he says next, or rather, listen to what he did next. It says, therefore I chased them from me, and remember them my Elohim, because they have defiled the priesthood and the covenant of the priesthood and of the Levites. Thus I cleansed them from all strangers and appointed the wards of the priests and the Levites, every one in his business. So while Nehemiah was gone, somebody had let some strangers and Gentiles in to the sacred precincts, and they was living up in the area where only the set apart people was supposed to be at. Somebody was not guarding the sacredness of the temple. And Nehemiah went in there and cleared all of them out. Went in there telling, hey, y'all got to go. Y'all got to get up out of here. He had a mind to guard the sacredness. That's the same mind we have to have, because that's the mind that the Most High has. Even in the Messiah's kingdom, the Gentiles and strangers will not be allowed in certain areas that are sacred. As it says in Ezekiel 44, verse 6 through 9, and thou shalt say to the rebellious, even to the house of Israel, thus saith the Most High, O ye house of Israel, let it suffice you of all your abominations, and that ye have brought into my sanctuary strangers, uncircumcised in heart and uncircumcised in flesh, to be in my sanctuary, to pollute it, even my house, when ye offer my bread, the fat and the blood, and they have broken my covenant because of all your abominations. So the Most High was rebuking them for making the same mistake that the men did in the days of Nehemiah, to let the culture vultures and the cultural appropriators in to partake of the sacred thing that was forbidden to them. The Most High is rebuking them for doing that. So we must not make the same mistake they did. Don't let these strangers and Gentiles come amongst you and then turn around and use what they're not supposed to know about against you. You see? Listen to what the Father says next. And ye have not kept the charge of my holy things, but ye have set keepers of my charge in my sanctuary for yourselves. Thus saith the Most High, no stranger uncircumcised in heart, nor uncircumcised in flesh shall enter into my sanctuary of any stranger that is among the children of Israel. So the Father says it's borders, it's boundaries to this. There's certain boundaries that the Gentile and the stranger cannot pass. They can inherit salvation. They can keep the laws and commands of the Most High. They can cling to the Messiah and cling to his people. But even in all that, there's still certain things that they're not allowed to. And the Father is wise. The reason he did that is because he knows their heart. That's why it's written in Revelation chapter 20, verse 7 through 9, that even after 1,000 years in the Messiah's kingdom, they are going to try to stage an uprising against the Most High's people. And the only reason they will not be able to succeed is, number one, because the Most High will fight for us. And number two, in Messiah's kingdom, we will be keeping the laws and commands of Torah. So the Gentiles was not allowed in those sacred areas. Even the ones that was living close among us on the land will still not be allowed in certain sacred areas. Because if we would allow them in there, they might have overthrown us again in this rebellion. But listen to Revelation chapter 20, verse 7. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And they went up on the breadth of the earth and compassed the camp of the saints and the beloved city. And fire came down from the Most High out of heaven and devoured them. So the reason I read that is because you see, even 1,000 years into the kingdom, they still going to try to run in and be culture vultures and be cultural appropriators. They still going to rise up against our people. And when you read Ezekiel 38 and 39, it says only 1/6 of them will be left after that attack. So only 1/6 of the Gentiles and strangers will truly have a heart for the Most High and his people. And those will be the ones it talks about in Revelation 21 and 22 about the kings of the nations that will come in and out of the city. And those will be parts of the nations that was saved because they clung to the Most High and didn't join in the rebellion with all their other brothers and sisters in Revelation 20, verse 7 through 9. Yet and still, we learn a hard lesson over and over again that when you let these folks too close, when you bring them into your sacred things, you need to understand you are amongst wolves and serpents. Do not allow them amongst the sacred things that the Father has commanded you not to allow them around. Because let's go to 2 Kings chapter 20, verse 12 through 18, and let's read about the mistake that Hezekiah made when he allowed the Gentile and the stranger in amongst our sacred things that they was not supposed to be able to be around. Listen to what it says. At that time, Berodach Baladan, the son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent letters and a present unto Hezekiah, for he had heard that Hezekiah had been sick. So this Gentile king, this stranger, sending these gifts to Hezekiah because he was sick. So it seems like he had good intentions, right? He seemed like a nice stranger and a nice Gentile. Oh, he's cool. He wouldn't do nothing. Okay, let's read further and see what happened. And Hezekiah hearkened unto them and showed them all the house of his precious things, the silver and the gold and the spices and the precious ointment. That's that ointment that the Father commanded him not to allow the Gentile and the stranger to see. And all the house of his armor and all that was found in his treasures. There was nothing in his house nor in all his dominion that Hezekiah did not show them. That was a mistake. He let the Gentile and the stranger come into the sacred places to see all his treasure, to see all the sacred oils, to see all his wealth. And you guessed it, right on time, you know they're going to turn against him, right? Because that's what they do. Listen to what Isaiah rebuked them. It says, "Then came Isaiah the prophet unto King Hezekiah and said unto him, What did these men say? And from whence came they unto thee? And Hezekiah said, They are come from a far country, even from Babylon." So he let Babylonians in to see the sacred, precious thing. Brothers and sisters, we have to guard our sacredness from these Babylonians. Listen to what happens next. And Isaiah asked him, "What have they seen in thine house?" And Hezekiah answered, "All the things that are in my house have they seen. There is nothing among my treasures that I have not showed them." And Isaiah said unto Hezekiah, "Hear the word of Yahuah. Behold, the days come that all that is in thine house and that which thy fathers have laid up in store unto this day shall be carried into Babylon. Nothing shall be left. And of thy sons that shall issue from thee, which thou shalt beget, shall they take away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon." So what happened whenever Hezekiah showed these Gentiles and these strangers the sacred things? They ended up taking everything. And that's what they always do when you allow them in too close and allow them to hear things and see things and touch things and taste things and feel things that was never meant for them, but that was only meant for our people. Stop letting these Gentiles and these strangers among your sacred things. You hear me? Let's go to the book of 2 Maccabees, chapter 6, verse 1 through 11. And let's see another situation of what happened where our people let the Gentiles and strangers in to the sacred things. It says, "Not long after the king sent an old Athenian to force the Jews to forsake the laws of their forefathers and cease to live according to the laws of Yahuah, but to pollute the temple in Jerusalem and to call it that of the Olympian Zeus, and to call the one in Gerizim that of Zeus the Hospitable, in keeping with the character of those who lived there. This harshly and most grievously intensified the evil." Listen to what they did whenever they got into our sacred things. "For the heathen filled the temple with profligacy and revelry, amusing themselves with prostitutes and lying with women within the sacred precincts and bringing into it things that were forbidden. The altar was covered with abominable offerings which the laws forbade. A man could not keep the Sabbath or celebrate the festivals of his forefathers or admit he was a Jew at all. On the monthly celebration of the king's birthday, they were taken by bitter necessity to taste the sacrifices. And when the festival of Dionysus was celebrated, they were compelled to wear wreaths of ivy and march in procession in his honor." So you see that right there? How they went in there and they defiled, stole, killed, and destroyed all our sacred things. And the reason that happened is because we did not guard our sacredness. We allowed the cultural appropriators to come in and do what they always do, which is steal, kill, and destroy. It all happened back in chapter 4, 2 Maccabees. Listen to what they did. It says, "When the king had consented and he had taken office, he immediately brought his countrymen over to the Greek way of living. He set aside the royal ordinances, especially favoring the Jews, secured through John, the father of Upolemus, who went on the mission to the Romans to establish friendly relations and an alliance with them, and abrogating the lawful ways of living, he introduced new customs contrary to the law. For he willingly established a gymnasium right under the citadel, and he made the finest of the young men wear the Greek hat. And to such a pitch did the cultivation of Greek fashions and the coming in of foreign customs rise, because of the excessive wickedness of this godless Jason, who was no high priest at all, that the priests were no longer earnest about the services of the altar, but disdaining the sanctuary and neglecting the sacrifices, they hurried to take part in the unlawful exercises in the wrestling school, after the summons to the discus throwing, regarding as worthless the things their forefathers valued, and thinking Greek standards the finest. As a result, they found themselves in a trying situation, for those whose mode of life they cultivated and whom they wished to imitate exactly became their enemies and punished them. So these same folks that they allowed into the sacred precinct and to touch the sacred things that was forbidden to them ended up becoming their enemies. So you see, brothers and sisters, We must guard our sacredness. We must keep these laws and commands the Father gave us about not letting these Gentiles in to lord over you and to lead you in the assembly. To keep these laws and commands, not to let them come in and take of our culture, of our set apart garments, and of our set apart oil. Don't let them do that. You see? This is the mentality we need to have. We need to have the same mentality as Joseph and of Mordecai. For both of them, when they was amongst the Gentiles and had a high position, they still did not allow themselves to be defiled in the ways of the Gentiles. Joseph, whenever he came up with the idea given to him by the Most High of how to keep them out of the famine, he got something from it. So in other words, my people, what I'm telling you is that if you have to do business amongst the Gentiles, don't give them of the sacred and precious thing. But if you give of them something that will be a help to them, make sure that you benefit all the more. Just like Joseph, whenever he gave the Gentiles and the Egyptians of his knowledge, his gifts and his talents, he made sure that he and his family ate from it and that he benefited. His mind is what freed Egypt from those 7 years of famine. And because he was wise, he used his gifts and abilities to then bring the rest of our people into Egypt to put us in a place of wealth as well. Don't be like these coons and bedwenches who allowed the Gentiles to use them and abuse them and pimp their gifts and talents, but yet they don't get nothing from it that will benefit their family or their people. Don't be like that. If you're going to be in that position, in that high position amongst them, do like Joseph did and make sure that your talents, your gifts and abilities that they are benefiting from, that it benefits you and your people more than it benefits them. Just like Mordecai, he was in the palace of the king, but he used that position such that he never bowed down to Haman, who was the enemy of our people. Even though he had a top position in the palace, he never bowed down to Haman, and he always kept the way and culture of his people and did not allow the cultural appropriators of the culture vultures to steal our culture. You see? So we got to be like Joseph and like Mordecai amongst these Gentiles and strangers that we have to do business with and work amongst. For while we are in this strange land amongst this strange people, we must be wise in how we do business. Or how the Messiah said, make friends of yourself of unrighteous mammon so that they may receive you into an everlasting home. What the Messiah was saying is that learn how to move wisely in doing business amongst the Gentile and the stranger. Learn how to do business amongst them. But like the law and command says in Deuteronomy 23:20, unto a stranger thou mayest lend upon usury, but unto thy brother thou shalt not lend upon usury. So what it's saying there is you must learn how to capitalize off these Gentiles and strangers, not use and abuse them, not vex them. For the Most High commands us not to vex the stranger and not to rule unjustly against the stranger. I'm not saying manipulate, seduce, and deceive them like they did us. I'm saying keep them in their proper place. Make sure that when you do business with them, you benefit from the business transaction more than they do. And that your people benefit from that business transaction more than their people do. That's what I'm saying. Be like Mordecai and like Joseph. For listen to what it says about Mordecai in Esther chapter 10, verse 3. For Mordecai the Jew was next unto King Ahasuerus, and great among the Jews, and accepted of the multitude of his brethren, seeking the wealth of his people, and speaking peace to all his seed. So even though Mordecai had that high position in the palace, he had a mind to where he guarded the sacred thing from the Gentile and from the stranger. He didn't allow Haman to come in and take what belonged to our people. But he had Esther destroy the whole family of Haman and all the people that was going to rise up against the Hebrews, told them to fight and kill them. That's the same mentality we got to have, brothers and sisters. We got to be like Nehemiah. We got to be like Joseph. We got to be like Esther. We got to guard our sacredness from these culture vultures and cultural appropriators. Let's not make the same mistake that Hezekiah did of letting them in. Let's not make the same mistake as the high priest in the days of the Maccabees of letting the Gentiles and the strangers in to partake of the sacred thing. No, guard and defend the sacred, precious, set apart thing from these culture vultures, these thieves, these killers, these murderers, and these destroyers. Do not let them devour the holy seed and the sacred thing. Hallelujah. Shalom.